So you watched the 3 videos before this and you ultimately decided that you are still going to move forward with keeping fish on campus. But you don't know what fish you want to keep? Stick around, I have 10 fish that you may want to think about. What is going on, everybody? My name is Harry from Pharmaquatics. Here you'll get tips, reviews, research-based best practices for all of you casual keepers out there. Welcome to the 4th and final part of this series. Well, technically it's the 3rd part because the first 2 were parts A and part B. But anyway, it's the last part of the series. In this last part of the series, I'm going to give you 10 suggestions on how you should stock your tank that you're going to be keeping during college. Now, before I get into the list, I want to give you some assumptions as well as some disclaimers. First, I'm going to assume that you are completely new to the hobby. Second, I'm going to assume that your university policy allows you to have at least a 5 to 20 gallon fish tank. 3 is that this list is by no means a fully comprehensive list. This list is more so based off of my own suggestions as well as some of the research that I did. 4th is that this is not a comprehensive care guide either. The goal here is to take my baseline list and use it more so as a starting point and a foundation. And ultimately, you have to do the research yourself for whichever fish you decide to pick. So as I was building this list, there were a number of factors that I had to consider. First and foremost, and probably the most obvious, is the size of your tank. The size of your tank will determine not only the type of species that you can keep, but also if you can keep multiples of that species, if you can keep combinations of different species. Secondly, since this list is specifically for college students, I really weighed in heavily on the maintenance. So something we really want to avoid is overstocking these tanks. A cleanup crew wouldn't hurt either because that may help you from an algae perspective as well. 3rd is hardiness. Of course, you want to make sure that your first fish are going to be hardy so that you have a good experience. But this shouldn't be an excuse for you to abuse your fish. Make sure you still do your research. 4th factor is reproductive potential. Overall, I tried to avoid this as much as I could. As I go into this list, I am going to be doing it in ascending order of tank size. First, we're going to start off with the smaller tank sizes and move our way up to the higher tank sizes. Any fish that are applicable to the smaller tanks will be applicable to the bigger tanks. First, let's start off with some stocking ideas for 5 to 10 gallon tanks. First stocking idea would be just plants. Now hear me out for a second. Growing plants accomplishes a lot of things that people may be looking for in fish keeping. It provides responsibility. You get the satisfaction of seeing your plants grow over time through that appropriate care. And plants are a living object that require responsibilities in order for them to thrive. Second on the list would be snails. Now with snails, you usually have 2 options. It's usually mystery snails or narite snails. I personally like narite snails because with mystery snails, you will need a lid because they are known to be escape artists. They also, in my personal experience, can eat plants that I don't want them to eat necessarily. But with narite snails, the only downside to them is that they lay these little eggs all over the place. They won't hatch because they only hatch in brackish water. I would say mystery snails look a little bit cooler than narite snails because they do get bigger, but you really can't go wrong with either one. The snails that I would avoid are those snails that can reproduce asexually, such as those pest snails, because those can overrun your tank really quick. 3rd on the list would be red cherry shrimp or any Neocaridina shrimp for that matter. I honestly think shrimp are really fascinating to look at. Neocaridinas come in a plethora of different colors. They also can reproduce to an extent, but I think reproduction from a shrimp case should be fine, especially if you are keeping them in a 5 gallon tank or higher. I would definitely suggest Neocaridinas over Caridinas because Caridinas have more stringent water parameters that they need to live through. The one exception would be a mono shrimp, but those shrimp get pretty big, so I would suggest anything a little higher such as a 10 gallon. Another alternative to Neocaridinas would be the ghost shrimp, which is just as accessible and they are just as hardy. My 4th suggestion, and everyone probably saw this coming, would be a betta fish. And I know it's pronounced betta, but I'm gonna say betta, okay? So bettas come in a plethora of different colors. They come in a plethora of different fin types, different personalities. I think you cannot go wrong with a betta fish. Be on the lookout for some betta care videos that I have in the works, so if you do decide to go this route, I got you covered. One little side note, if you do decide to pick one of those giant betta fish, they would not suffice in a 5 gallon. I actually suggest that you should use a 10 gallon for those types of betta fish. Betta fish are near and dear to my heart. I kept them as a child when I had no idea what I was doing. They are also the first fish I chose to keep when I decided to get serious in the fish keeping hobby. 5th on the list would be Antler Guppies. Antler Guppies are really similar to guppies guppies, but they stay a lot smaller. They come in a plethora of different colors and I think they look awesome. My one suggestion is to make sure that you only keep male guppies so that there is no reproduction, just because guppies, endlers, and any live bearers are known to reproduce really quickly. From personal experience, live bearers are not as hardy as betta fish, so keep that in mind. But with the right research, I think anyone is very much so capable of keeping endlers. Next, let's move on to suggestions for 10 to 20 gallon tanks. So for my fifth suggestion, I would suggest the honey gourami. Honey gouramis are pretty versatile. They make as a great focal point fish in a community tank. They are known to be very docile, so they can do well in pairs, groups, and even solo. They also don't get too big. They can max out at around 2.5 to 3.5 inches, and I think gouramis in general look really cool. My sixth suggestion would be a small colony of tetras, but I would specifically suggest the neon tetra because they stay small. Cardinal tetras and green tetras can get pretty big really fast, so if you are going to be keeping a 20 gallon, maybe those would be a suggestion. With any of these tetra colonies, I suggest getting at least 6 so that they can school appropriately. The seventh suggestion would be chili rasboras. Chili rasboras stay super tiny, usually less than an inch or up to an inch. A really cool thing about chili rasboras is that they are not shy, which is definitely preferable. And similar to the tetras, I wouldn't go any less than a colony of 6. My eighth suggestion would be celestial pearl Danios. I'm sure this isn't much of a surprise for most of you because these fish are on pretty much any 10 gallon tank suggestion list out there on YouTube. They're tried and tested, so of course I'm going to add it to my list. They're known to be shy, but they're peaceful, which is what's most important. They don't usually school like tetras, they actually shoal, and I would keep them in a group of at least 7. Celestial pearl Danios may not be the most hardy, but that is really dependent on where you get these fish. If you get them at a local fish store that has good breeders and good sources, then you should be fine. My ninth suggestion would be Pygmy Corys. These Corys are really cute, they stay small, less than an inch, they school together, they swim in the mid layer, which is pretty unique for Cory catfish. They wiggle around like weirdos, but they're still cute. Did I mention they're cute? Similar to the celestial pearl Danios, for this I would go for a group of 7 or more. And with that, a 20 gallon would be preferred. My 10th and final suggestion would be male guppies, platies, or mollies. So as I said earlier, it may be in your best interest to make sure that you don't have fish that reproduce because those babies will equate to more work and more time and more effort. But I mean, if you want to go that route and really deep dive into the fish keeping hobby, by all means, a 10 gallon or 20 gallon would suffice for a guppy pair. So those are my 10 suggestions. If you do end up going with a 20 gallon tank, I would really consider making a community tank where you pick multiple suggestions from the list and mix and match. The only caveat would be the betta fish. That is on a case by case basis, honestly. Personality wise, some betta fish are really chill and don't really care, while others are pretty territorial and aggressive. Other than the betta, all the other fish that I put on this list are pretty peaceful, so you should be fine on that front. Some fish you want to really avoid include goldfish, angelfish, and even plecos because they get really big. My one and final tip as you are planning out how you're going to be stocking your fish tanks is to go to aqadvisor.com. In this website, you could basically put the fish that you think you're going to be putting in your tank, type in the dimensions of your tank, and then it will spit out whether or not you are overstocking your tank or not. This website is pretty conservative on judging whether it's overstocked or not, so there is potential upside to that. Regardless, now you have an extra tool in your arsenal to get that third opinion. If this video brought any value to you, be sure to boop that like button. Article for this video will be linked down in the description, pharmaquatics.com. Comment down below any piece of advice that you may have that pertains to the fish keeping hobby. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the topic we talked about today, and I can potentially feature it on my next video. As I always say, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. What is going on, everybody? My name is Harry from Pharmaquatics. Here you'll get this list is more so just my suggestions and based off of research that I did. Alright, enough jibber japping. Jibber japping? I personally like mystery snails. No, I don't. I personally like narite snails, but they are also the first fish I chose to keep when I decided to get serious in this fish keeping hobby.